My house is Pandemic, the co-op game.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the benefits of working in a medical laboratory is that I don't, if I get hit with something that's pretty hardcore, I can usually brush off the light stuff because I'm exposed to it, I guess.
You'd think it was a teacher, I would be the same way, but I don't know.
You do get a little bit that way, yeah. If you stay hydrated in a school setting, you are like not going to be happy or healthy. Happy, healthy, hydrated.
This part is like this happened last year too, because it happened like right before HeavyCon.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think I was going to be able to go that year, and it ended up I killed enough of it to, possibly deal with Denver compromised lungs and altitude and all. I'm like, I've been on antibiotics. I'm not patient zero people. I am not the con crud.
That's what gets me is the con crud. I go to a con, I come back, and like 3 days later, I'm like, oh my God, what the hell?
Well, it's finally been warm around here, and I haven't been sick since it started, so I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of nice. And anyway, well, hey Mur, it's good to see you there. Mur was asking, like, is this the off week? It's actually gonna be next week that we're gonna record on Tuesday. Next week we're recording a couple of days early, with as many people as can make it. I know that's not our normal recording time, and I think that might be post Taekwondo, so we could have a sleeping Trent who says he's on the way. So yeah, okay. Must be pretty warm down there. Actually, you know what, Mur? I think it's gotten to that point of the year when it's like kind of hot, right? I mean, it's pretty warm down Jacksonville town, and yeah, Trent's on his way. We we won the district meet with the tennis team, and what was nice about that, we won it by 1 point, and because we won it by 1 point, this was all on last Wednesday actually. Because we won by 1 point, we actually got to take Saturday off. If we'd not won, if we'd gotten second or third, we would have had to play on Saturday. So our team advances, and we got a bye for the first round, and now we're kind of like in the Sweet 16 of tennis teams in the state of Iowa 1A, and looking pretty good for our matchup this Saturday, except the weather doesn't look good. Looks like we're going to get some hardcore thunderstorms. That aren't gonna let us...
What day is that?
Saturday?
For the love of God. My lawn needs mowed so bad.
Okay.
Well, maybe lightning will just hit fire.
Well, see, the problem is, like, since I'm taking a year off and, we're not, like, paying for things like cleaners and lawnmowers, I had to rebuy a lawnmower. We got rid of that. Then it got in. Then we all got the plague. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't going to attempt to, mow a lawn when I couldn't walk across the house without, like, collapsing from exhaustion.
Yeah.
So now... And I'm in sort of manicured suburbia, so I'm sure my neighbors are glaring at my house with hatred in their eyes.
Have you mowed it yet at all?
No.
Wow, yeah, I've mowed mine twice already.
Well, to be fair, I'm not much,
Well, to be fair, neither am I, Andy. What do you think? I'm like Mr. out there with the spring green or something? No. I will say this, though. It's been easy to keep motivated with trying to do lawn stuff because my wife is doing all kinds of stuff, too, which I didn't know that would happen. But her allergies, I think, this year weren't quite as bad as they normally were because they just hit real hard and were over real quick with the fact that we basically skipped spring. And she's been putting together, vegetable gardens and getting, other stuff. I mean, it's just kind of nice, something nice to do together. It's something I wouldn't really... it doesn't give me joy if I did it by myself, but I don't really mind it doing it together. And also, I've been blasting some podcasts while I do that. I've been listening to Cardboard in the Classroom, which Norm does.
Norm's thing, yeah.
Yeah, and then also their cardboard conjecture. So I mean, I've been really enjoying both of those programs. I just it's one of those things where when you're doing something like mowing the lawn, it takes an activity that's just mind numbing and it makes it really entertaining. Because if I was trying to do anything, like if I'm trying to grade and it's anything beyond just like check boxes and looking at patterns, I can't listen to a podcast. I can only focus on one thing at once.
That's what I make my students mad. I'd be like, you should let us listen to music. It's shown that music helps you do better on work. I'm like, yeah, that's classical music. You want me to throw on some opera on game?
Well, the problem is
FM can die. That's not getting played in my room.
The problem is it's not the type of music. The problem is as soon as they like start working on music, it's like they become their own personal DJ and they just don't do what they're the assignment. They use it like it's like an avoidance thing that they can do. Not every kid is like that. Of course there's kids that are like out there that are like, why can't we have these nice things? I actually do well with music. But it's definitely something where like a lot of kids, especially the kid that'll raise his hand and be like, hey, can I listen to music? They're going to be the one that's like, hey, everybody, I can listen to music. Check this out. Like, here I am, like pumping my tunes.
Yeah. And, well, no, they've done studies on it. Like, you can't do music that has words in it if you're trying to do a language task because it uses the same parts of the brain. But if it's like instrumental music, you can kind of combine that with other things. But they like the music and the task you're doing cannot use the same brain regions, or they totally interfere with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, well, the different genders, do they actually like work differently on that, or is that just a myth?
I think mostly just a myth, although I have read a couple articles where like, as much as we like to say we're both the same, like definitely female brains and male brains process differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like we definitely use different parts of our brain for language development and whatnot. Because it was also one of those ones that gets interesting when you look at like transgender, because people that identify as female who are male, their brain processes like a female.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
Oh, no, I wasn't either, but it was interesting.
Yeah.
They did like this other cool study I saw, but it was like, have you ever seen like those hidden object games? Like, you have to like, there's just a jumbled mess and you have to find certain objects in a quick time span or something.
I feel like there's a dozen different things from what you said that I feel like I've seen before, but I'm sure I've seen it.
They did a similar study with males and females on that and transgender people and stuff. And like they found people that identify as males are much quicker at getting them the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So like we're quicker to spot things, but that when exposed to the same situation repeatedly, we never really got substantially better. But females didn't do as well the first time, but they learned better on it and they were able to find them faster and faster and faster.
That's interesting. The big thing my kids have been doing is like playing this robotic voice where there's two robotic voices that say a totally different word at the same time, and they play it, and you can only like your brain kind of chooses one of them. And, it's like 25% of people hear this word, 75% of people hear this word, and then they play it for me to see which one I hear. They don't tell me, of course, anything about it. Just tell me what you hear. And, So have you heard of that one? The one that has like the word. I don't want to say the word. I mean, I kind of want to like play it, or, like I don't want to spoil it for you because
I'll check it out.
The popular one that I've heard over and over and over is always the same two words said at the same time. So if I said the words, it might spoil it for you. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
The one I did when I taught 6th grade one year was great because we did an experiment about how sound affects taste. And so, it's basically
what you guys do, like acid?
No, it's like why it's basically the reason airline food tastes like crap. it's like the sound of the jet engine wrecks your sense of taste.
Really? Because I don't know. I always enjoy the airline food. I think part of it is just that, like, I'm kind of, seated in a, I'm like almost in containment, like you're not supposed to stand up and move around. So there's only so many things you can do. And I don't know, when they bring it to you, it's like everything is individually packaged. I feel like by the time that you're done, you somehow have more wrappers than you had when you started. Like you have way more, there's more volume to your meal, and it never goes back together in a way that fits in any way. It's like,
yeah, no, what I did was there was these 2 sound files I found, and they influenced your taste of chocolate and coffee. And so I passed out like semi-sweet chips because you don't want to use ones that are like too naturally sweet. So I let kids put it in their mouth and think about it, and then I played this higher pitch sound, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's really sweet." And then I played the lower pitch sound, still with the same semi-sweet chips, and like this girl, like her face scrunched up like she had just like ate a sour lemon, and she like charged for the like wastebasket and spit it up.
Wow, just based on the change of sound, not based on the change of the actual food at all, the actual composition. That's crazy.
Basically, I saw that experiment. I'm like, that's so evil. I have to do it to children.
Nice. Speaking of so evil, you have to do it to children. Trent, how are your kids doing? Oh, Trent just joined us, but he's maybe he's still dealing with it.
Hello, can you hear me?
There you are, Trent. Welcome, sir.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. That sounds like Trent's running at 100%. Right?
Gotcha.
Full energy.
So, Trent, I finally got you on a we're gonna have fun with your hype today.
Okay.
All right. And I got your review from last week, which I mean I'm totally cool with taking that one, but I will help you talk about it. I played it with you.
No, I'm good. Let's do this. I'm ready.
Okay, you got it. All right. So the same thing. I just wanted to make sure because okay. Well, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, Joe Sallin. I'm being joined tonight by 3 co-hosts, the full gamut, starting with Andy Dennison. How you doing?
Awesome. School's almost out.
Yay. What's better, the last day of school or the first day of no school?
The first day of no school.
Okay. I feel like I switch into a gear that just like where time moves at a just different pace during summer. And I feel like that last day of school when it's like I still worked hard today, but it's like I don't have to do anything tomorrow for that first time. That's the moment I appreciate. It's kind of like that Friday versus Saturday debate, the endless debate of what would you rather have, Friday or Saturday? Which TC, you love Fridays because you get some of those off, right, sir?
Yeah, Fridays are good. Not this Friday though. Next Friday will be better. Yes, I'm going to. I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to bask in the glow of winning second place at an L5R tournament yesterday. Nice. Hey Trent, you know what the most miserable thing in the world to see is?
What? 2
crab clans fighting each other.
Oh, it's a long game.
My goodness, that is the most long. It's like two sumo wrestlers just standing there staring at each other and neither one's making a move.
Or 2 actual physical crabs.
Yeah, just like
just imagine like a bunch of sidestepping and never actually making contact.
And not nearly as cool as crabs with knives.
So yeah, I went through, played my game, won it, and I looked around and I was like, dude, I crushed the last stronghold. Where are you guys at? Well, I broke 1. Look, 45 minutes into the game, you got 15 minutes left to actually do something before the tournament time's over. Wow.
Well, congratulations, you silver fox, you.
Yeah. I don't know how I managed it, but it sure is a heck of a lot of fun. So and that answers the question. We haven't talked about L5R in a while. I'm still playing it.
Nice. Well, I think that actually gives you you now have the same accolade that Trent's son Joe does, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
He came in I don't know, he did really well. I don't remember what the final standings are, but he did really well a few weeks ago at one around here.
Okay.
Oh, what clan was he?
Phoenix.
Yeah, I changed mine up and tried Lion just to be out and out aggro, and it took everyone by surprise. And I think that's the only reason I took second place, because no one expected me coming out swinging with the Lion clan deck.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, right?
You're not Scorpion? Oh no, I don't know how to play against you.
And we have sitting on the comfy chair in his bathroom, in his spare bathroom, Trent Ham. How you doing, Trent?
All right, I'm here.
It's good. It's good to hear from you, dude. So all of you guys are here, and we're going to be talking today about board games, as we always do. First, we will review a game apiece. We'll then talk about indirect player interaction and the most intense that can get. This is based on a suggestion from our wonderful guild, which you should check out and join. That's on Board Game Geek. That is boardgamegeek.com/guild/2173. Create an account if you have to, and actually create 4 more accounts and then join the guild. It's all about metrics. It is in this age of analytics and metrics, and you know what? It's worth it. You can just let them sit there. You know, you can comment every now and then. You could have one. You could have one of be your L5R account, and one of them be like your trolling account, just in case it gets banned. You're not going to put anything all too important in that, and the rest of them, you can actually be friends with Andy on one account, which I don't recommend doing on more than one. That's you can follow Andy, and then your inbox will be so full of nonsensical, just
every tidbit I say is useful information.
To someone.
I even had a student.
I think Andy's going to design the game Arkwright Horror.
No, like I legitimately had
that actually sounds awesome.
Once. I had a student tell me 2 weeks ago that they're like, I love you as a science teacher. We get like all this bonus science and history stuff that's not in the textbook.
Nice, dude. No, I like that stuff too. Giving it context always makes it a little more entertaining. So, but anyway, that's why we try to avoid context in this show, and we don't say anything about anything. We just, give a review, give a rating, say it's fun, not fun, or whether or not we like it, and then move on. I mean, that's the
no, we don't do that. We give it, then we argue about the definition of fun, and then get in trouble for using the word fun, and then we talk about the game some more. Come on, Joe, we got to keep it real. Come on.
And then someone brings up Space Alert, and it just goes to hell.
Straight to hell.
Oh yeah. So things can turn into a bit of a mess. Well, before the friendship all dissolves, we tend to hype games. And anyway, that's what you're in for. If this is your first time joining the Good, the Board, and the Ugly for an episode, I hope that this is that we can deliver on all the things that you were promised by those folks that told you should never, ever stoop to this level. So I did want to mention before we moved on any further that we are not alone in this world. No, the Good, the Board, and the Ugly actually is part of a group of cardboard cohorts. Cardboard conjecture cohorts, and there's just really some awesome stuff being produced by other content producers out there, and I'm specifically talking about one, and that is, well, I guess I should say a team up in Saskatoon. Norm and the Bridge City Board Gamers have upped their content production in 2 different spheres. And I have actually started cutting my grass here because we actually finally got a little bit of a breath, a slap in the face of spring now before we go into our summer here in the northern Midwest where some of us are at. And I'm out there cutting the grass, which good people do. The bad people don't. Andy. But the good people out there like me cut the grass and listen to podcasts.
The fact that it's still alive is my concession.
You haven't killed it yet?
I want my yard to die.
Wow, and this is the science teacher here.
It's an invasive species. It needs death.
Grass is an invasive species?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Trent, what do you think about that?
I don't like mowing the grass either. It's pretty miserable. I know.
Well, make your grass mowing less miserable by listening to the good folks at Bridge City Board Gamers. You got intense, in-depth reviews that are pointed in specifically about a pair of games. That's coming to you from Norm and Ryan, and those are some really excellent. They go to a deeper level than you'll get out there with other media, and that's what really is refreshing to me about them. They don't just slap a rating and move on. It is good, intense, deep discussion, and I really enjoy that. And then to me, the fantastic and unique product that Norm has been coming through with is called Cardboard in the Classroom. It is just inspiring, the amounts of board games that Norm and Ryan are using to teach in their high school classrooms. History, math, health, and pandemic. No, there's no health. I hope you're okay, Trent.
Oh, I thought I turned off my mic. I'm sorry.
Are you alive?
It was a contextual thing. So, but Norm and Ryan have just been really putting out some amazing content, and a ton of it in the last few months. So check them out. They're on iTunes, the Bridge City Board Gamers. Some amazing stuff, and they plug us in all their podcast episodes, which is a mistake. And I keep trying to tell them that they deserve better, but it's the least we can do. To I guess give our audience an outlet for those times when they actually rage quit in the middle of one of the Good Board Ugly episodes. I'm into the self-deprecation today. I'm just feeling it. I'm feeling it.
Make people rage quit. That would take too much effort on my part.
That's why you're here, TC.
We're doing pretty good if it wasn't one of us who was the one who rage quit.
Nice. Yeah, it wasn't one of us. That's true. If it was, hopefully it's not one of the folks here in our chat, because our chat's gotten some lively responses here. Looks like we got Murr, we have Carter, we have Jason. It's good to hear from you guys. Jason, I think I've heard from you before, but anyway, join us at our live recordings. They're always at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Central Standard Time. Goodness gracious, this mango sparkling bested me. So 9 o'clock p.m. Come and check us out. We've had Murr, who's got one of the longest board game playing streaks going on. Who's up into the 1200s, 1300s, and I my brain gets wiped clean every time I say it. But anyway, yeah, Murr's been playing board games for a long time, like 4+ years. And anyway, it's good to hear from him and other folks. So my dad sometimes joins in, yeah, just to come and tell me how much of a disappointment I've turned out to be. So. And taking that as a spring point here. Speaking of disappointments, let's hear from it.
Woo! I was worried there for a second.
It is slightly disappointing, as in I've been playing mostly real life Pandemic for like 2 weeks, so nothing has happened. I guess, I don't know. I thought I'd review real quick. I have been nicely distracting myself while just setting up a board game would probably cause me to have a heart attack because I can't get enough air into my lungs. Oh. So I've been distracting myself by playing the Banner Saga on the iPad. Banner Saga's, it's kind of a story-driven tactical RPG setup. What it most feels like to me is if you took the combat system of like a Final Fantasy Tactics or something like that, and then put it in one of those old John Denver, I think it's John Denver, gaming books or choose your own adventure kind of things. They even got the amusing part of the choose your own adventure right. That part where you're like, which of these 4 options do you pick? And you flip to the page and found out like your favorite character just got brutally murdered. And you go, okay, reload. Like where you start back from the beginning.
Yeah.
So they captured that feeling even. I gotta give them credits.
Nice.
But honestly, no, it's been a fun little distraction. I have to say though, because I think they're up to 3 now, and it comes out on Steam first. I think if I had bought this for anything above a normal app price, I might have been kind of felt gypped. But as like a $5 app RPG on the iPad, it's actually pretty fun. And it's based on Norse mythology, which you don't see a lot in RPGs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like real Norse mythology, not just like Viking whack head in with axe.
Cool, dude. It looks like there is a board game from this studio as well. It looks like they've got one, the Banner Saga board game.
Oh.
And speaking of Norse mythology, dude, I'm going to slap a little review up onto the top of this. I'm not going to do it on the podcast because it doesn't really relate, but I've been doing some unsolicited reviews of movies and games, and the new God of War game is actually set in Norse mythology, and I'm finally ready to do a review, having just completed it last night. So,
have you ever watched Yahtzee's reviews of things?
I've not yet.
You should go do that. It's awesome. By the way, he hates everything, so it's great.
Oh, yeah, it's one of those, like, angry reviews out there. I see, like, angry reviews. I need to slap that on because, like, our reviews are angry enough, right? We could slap angry review onto the top of every episode and get, like, an extra 1 million views.
Well, the best part is it's not just ranting. Like, he dissects everything and why it's bad or good. Like, the only game he consistently actually says is worth playing is Dark Souls.
Oh, I have a feeling that he and I might disagree at a fundamental level. Not to say anything wrong with Dark Souls, but it's definitely not, you know, like that sort of repetition and memorization of patterns is not, I don't see why people get so worked up over it.
I'm pretty sure if I was a kid, I would have like rage thrown something through a window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like me with Ninja Gaiden for the Xbox.
Oh god!
And that very first boss was, oh boy, it was like you get to the end of this level, nothing's quite challenged you yet, and then it's just like impossible, white-haired Mr. Miyagi is going to kill you every time, and you have no hope of surviving. So yeah, that's what Dark Souls is. So,
hey, but you played God of War, the new one. You can answer this question for me. Does the game have like one of those weird, awkward scenes that you don't want to see your children playing, like the other 3 did?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. No, this is like the mature rating from this one comes entirely from he's accompanied by his child in the whole thing. Like it's a different tone. The tone is totally different. But yeah, you can have Ian play this one and he'll be just fine.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about in the first few guides where I'm like,
this is like right out of the gate.
Nothing at all.
Yeah, it's always right out of the gate. It's one of those where it's like, you know, the one scene that your parents will walk into. I saw a meme of The Witcher 3 on the internet that was like, what Witcher 3 is 99% of the time, and it's like him fighting a monster, and then what Witcher 3 is when my mom walks in. And it's like, you know, one of those scenes.
Yeah,
like, is this the type of games you play? You know,
I had a buddy growing up where they had I don't know, it was some old RPG on the Super Nintendo, but you had like a dog is like your partner, and the poster that came out for it basically had like this snarling dog, and it said like the face of evil is ugly, but the face of good is even uglier. And like his mom walked in after he'd put it in the poster, and he's like, or she was like, "What is this supposed to mean?" And he looked at her seriously, goes, "Mother, it means I worship Satan." And she ran out of the room screaming.
Yep. Well, this new one though, I mean, you will be able, like, you'll be happy that Ian has played it because it's like the themes are totally different. It's actually like, it's largely about forming like a parental bond. So I mean, it's just totally different. It's nothing like
pure Kratos fashion as he uses his baby as a bludgeoning device.
Oh, yeah. So it's Lone Wolf and Cub. Got it.
Yeah, pretty much. It is basically TC. So, well, Andy, thanks for talking about the Banner Saga. I mean, it sounds interesting to me. I've heard some stuff about it. And you said that, like, you know, when you get to that point where you turn the wrong page and you're like, oh, my whole party's dead. This last weekend on Saturday, I experienced my very first total party kill. Yeah, the whole RPG crew got killed and it was because of stupid moves. It was those things where it's like, okay, here's a tunnel. Let's take this tunnel that's been boarded up by the orcs that live in this tunnel. They've boarded this up. Let's ignore the fact that they boarded it up. Let's just take away the boards, go inside this room, find that there's a bunch of skeletons on a shore, and there's like an underground, like water thing. And hey, why don't we just camp out here? Like that's a great idea, right? Let's go in there and camp out. And the orcs were like, we're gonna lock you in there, and then Mr. Froghemoth took us all down. So it was an entertaining thing, but I felt like it was what that party deserved for the dumb moves that got us in that situation. So, and I had a character that was kind of like the party leader, like the unofficial party leader, and I had PTSD from an encounter that left my character with this unable to surpass feeling of apathy. So even though I was like, this seems like a dumb idea, every time that I would be like, hey, so I'm going to go ahead and try to convince the party of doing something that's not this. And he'd be like, yeah, your character just can't get up what it takes to care.
He's just like, not feeling it.
Nope. So it was entertaining. And we all like immediately rolled other characters so that we could get back into the world because it was fun, It was a great time. So it was an interesting little go at Dungeons and Dragons in my continuing campaign there.
Nothing quite like a party wipe to spice up a game, huh?
This was, I don't know, like, let's put it like this. I don't think Josh specifically planned the party wipe, but I think that he's like, his theory is that things in his world exist. They don't exist based on like the appropriate level. They just exist. But he's not going to be totally unfair. If there's something you shouldn't do, he's going to have red flags, red flags, red flags. And the thing was, the only person in the party that was reading the red flags at any capacity was the person who couldn't care no matter how hard they tried. So it was a story, and it worked, and that was fun. It was like storytelling. So now that I'm cracking open a Sunkiss, let's move on with our reviews of Diet Sunkissed.
Diet.
Sunkiss.
Diet. Okay, cool. Word.
Thanks, TC. Yes,
you're welcome.
Because I'm not deserving of the actual flavor. I have to have this artificial stuff. That's why. So let's go ahead and hear from Trent about the new party game, Codenames Team word game phenomenon. I don't know if it's actually hit that stage yet, but it's definitely something along those lines.
Okay, I'm going to talk about Decrypto, which is a pretty new release from ILO Games. It was designed by I'm going to give this a shot because it's French. Thomas Dagenes L'Esperance. Let's go with it.
It was great, dude. Yes, I'm
nailed
sure.
it. Nailed it.
Crushed it.
Sure.
Crushed it.
So Decrypto I would describe it as about 70% Codenames and 30% Captain Sonar if you played either of those games. So basically in Decrypto, you have two teams of some number of players, just like Codenames. And those teams can be any number, but you probably need at least 2 per team. The box lists a minimum of 3 players, and there's a wonky 3-player variant. But I would stick with at least 4 for this game. So you have 2 teams. And each team is trying to correctly interpret the message. So you have these 4 code words that only your team can see. And the other team has 4 different code words only they can see. And what you're essentially trying to do is you're trying to figure out the other team's code words based on how they communicate with each other. Is honestly what you're trying to do to win. So the way it works is I see the 4 code names that my team has. And on this turn, I'm the one giving the clues. And I draw a card. And the card will say like 1.4.3 on it. Which means I need to give some sort of clue indicating the first word, the 4th word, and the 3rd word. So I give it 3 different clues. 1 for the first word, 1 for the 4th word, 1 for the 3rd word. Remember, my entire team can see these words, but the other team can't. So I give those clues. My teammates figure out which words I'm talking about, and they will say a sequence of numbers back. Ideally, they say the correct ones, theoretically. If they don't, we get basically what amounts to a losing token. And if you get 2 of the losing tokens, you lose.
Yeah, if I'm like, okay, it's word 1, then 3, then 4, and Trent looks at his and he's like, oh, crap, that wasn't the order.
Yep, you only get 2. If you do 2 of those, you lose, if you do that twice. Okay, Then the other team does it for their 4 words, and then you start going back and forth with it with the clue giver switching each round. And both teams have a sheet of paper where they can keep track of all this information on it. It's double-sided. It's pretty useful for keeping track of all the notes you might want to take. But what it gets interesting is the second round you're doing it, the other team has a chance to guess what the 3 numbers you're going after are. The first time they have no idea, so they're just listening. And they're writing down the clues you give, and then also they know which ones they associate with, because, if you say 1, 4, 3, they know the first clue is with the word 1, the second clue is with the word 4, and the third clue is with the word 3. Makes sense. So let's say on round 2, I draw a card that says 2, 2, 3, 1. So I give clues for each of those, but while my team is guessing and writing down what their guess is, the other team is doing the same thing and writing down their guess. When both teams have theirs written down, they both say what they are, what their guesses are. If the other team manages to figure out the 3 numbers right, they get a positive token. If they get 2 positive tokens, they win the game. So what ends up happening is, especially after the first round, but even to an extent during the first round, you have to kind of do the Dixit thing, where you're being you don't want to be too specific, because if you do, the other team will know what you're talking about. But if you're too vague, your own team won't know what you're talking about, even though they can see the words.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to kind of go in the middle a little bit. You have to kind of be somewhat vague, but somewhat specific. I found the easiest way to do it is to try to use synonyms. Like, if you have the word, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good one, but I'm like...
I would say, Trent, I would actually counter that immediately, and I don't, even before the example, synonyms can be the easiest codes to get intercepted, because like you almost want to go with a whole separate meaning that's going to throw them off the track.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm trying to think of like a different meaning for the same word is what I was trying to say. Like, I don't know. For some reason, I'm blanking on this, but like, I don't know. But a word that has 2 completely different meanings. The first time you're giving a clue, you may want to hit one of them. The second time, you may want to hit the second meaning. Like sun, the word S-O-N. That's an example of one. One time you might mean a child, another time you might mean the giant ball of fire in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, it could be either one, but the other team's not going to get it, but your team, hopefully being somewhat aware, will look at it and realize that you're going for 2 different meanings of sun. But that's like a very obvious example, but you can do that with lots of different words. Anything that has 2 very distinct different meanings. Like chair, like chairman of the board versus a chair you sit in. That's an example. You want to go for different meanings of those, but it gets, the more and more rounds you get, the trickier it gets.
Yeah, you start
harder and harder.
You start like digging for these like associations, and in a way that's kind of like, I think it was a really great comparison there, Trent. It's like code names with a little bit of that feeling of Dixit, where it's like, I want to make this obtuse so that the other team doesn't get it. They, of course, can't see the words, but I also don't want to make it so obtuse that my team doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Very well rounded in that, like how they achieved a gameplay style. You've always got the random like order of the words that could go, the numbers, but your words are the constant, and that's what becomes difficult to dig deeper, and try to like come up with something that's going to maybe send them in the wrong direction, while you're, it's head to head. It's got a real head-to-head aspect, like where you're getting way more in the heads of your opponents than say like code names, where there is no really getting in the head of your opponents, just like trying to maximize your own capabilities, right? So that's something that Decrypto seemed to do really well. What do you think about like in terms of, it's a $20 game, right? And what did you feel about like in terms of like the production and stuff? Did you think it was...
Production is fine. The production's comparable to code names, I would say. It comes with a pad of paper with a lot of pages, because you kind of both teams need a sheet of paper off the pad. So after about 30 or 40 plays, you need a new pad. But you can easily they have a PDF of it online, and you can just print them off if you want. I don't know. I thought it was perfectly good for given that it's like a $20 game, or less than that if you buy it on like an online retailer.
Yeah. Well, the fact that it was $20 what surprised me, because I kind of thought, like code names, all of those components are very straightforward. You could almost use the words from code names if you just built your own sort of thing. Your own sort of stand where you could see them better. And honestly, like if you just had a blind in between you, you could just play with those 4 words anyway, right?
Yes.
But what this has is it has cards where there's essentially I want to say 250 cards, but every card has like 4 words on it. So because you have a word, if you put it in this way and upside down, like there's 2 words on each side, and then there's 2 sides to every card. And the way they do that is there's all this blue, red writing on the card, red, like writing that's in red. And then it obscures the word. And then when you put it in this like special, it almost looks like 3D glasses, but it's like a 3D glasses card stand. Has like red cellophane sort of in it that makes it so you can't see the red writing, and instead you can only see like this blue word, and it's kind of highlighted. So it's kind of a nifty way of doing it. It seems like maybe yellow, I believe, is how this company's name is pronounced. And generally, like Asmodee companies, which this is one of like the first Asmodee companies I'm familiar with Asmodee actually owning, they tend to be very competent production-wise. They tend to be unique components, and I would say this one has that kind of aspect of unique components. Whereas when you lay out code names, it's really straightforward. It's just like a bunch of words. This one has a little bit more, it looks a little bit more fancy schmancy. When I saw that it was only $20, I was like, whoa, that's cheaper than I expected. So I mean, the game's solid, and I think that it's cool. I want to see, I want to see what Andy is like after he plays a game night where he plays nothing but this game 5-6 times in a row.
See, the same picture will be at my funeral.
The night when Andy played nothing but Codenames is like a night that will live forever in infamy. It was like that moment when Andy was the catalyst for Andy deciding that I am never doing this again. Like, I am in this for me, not for everybody else.
Well, we played Isle of Skye too.
On that day, are you sure?
Yeah, no, it was because there was like a day we played it, and it had been after 3 weeks of nothing but light games. And you're like, here, Isle of Skye, it's a little more crunchy. I'm like, I freaking hate this game. This is stupid. And then we played it 2 weeks later after I got a couple meteor games. I'm like, oh, this is all right.
All right. Well, Andy, you just served up the best transition of all time there, because my review is actually the expansion of Isle of Skye. Ooh. So right into that. So what is Isle of Skye? For anybody who's unfamiliar, you are going to be drawing tiles from a bag and placing them on your own personal castle region. And you're going to be scoring points based on dynamic scoring tiles, of which there's 16. You'll be drawing 4 of them, and so scoring is going to be different in every game. To give it a frame of reference, if you play the game Carcassonne has the same 4 general scoring in every game. And you just kind of know that, and you just keep drawing 1 tile at a time, and you're on a public castle region that you're building. This is your own private thing, but the scoring is going to change every game based on, features that are on tiles or the actual physical way that you're building, be it in long vertical columns or long horizontal columns or squares of 4, or there's many other things too. And there's a few area control type things that are in there where whoever has the most sheep gets 5 points, or whoever has the most whiskey barrels or gold. So there's some dynamic scoring. And what's cool about it is that the way that it does scoring is, the first round you score 1 of the 4 things, and the next round you score a different one. Then you score the first and the third, then you score the second and the fourth, then you score the first, third, fourth, and then the second, third, fourth. So it's this kind of cool way of as the game goes on, of the snowballing of scoring. But it creates a window of timing that I think makes it something a little bit more interesting than just say Carcassonne, right, Andy?
Yeah, I would say so.
Also, instead of just drawing tiles and placing them, you actually have to draw tiles and then make them available to the rest of the table. You draw them, you then set a price secretly. You draw 3 tiles, one of which you're going to chuck back in the bag, not even use, one of which, and the other 2 of which you have to have money, which you're going to get every single round, because you have a bit of an income engine that you're building up in the form of whiskey barrels that you're trying to connect to your starting castle to get more money at the start of every round. But as you go on playing the game, every round you're going to be drawing and adding these tiles. So in a common round, everybody's going to have the ability to buy a tile from one other player. You get to buy a tile, and then you have 2 tiles sitting in front of you. So theoretically, you could end up with either 3 tiles or only 1 tile or 0 tiles if you can't buy somebody else's tile or choose not to, and then people buy both of your tiles. Just FYI, having the most money in this game, probably not going to win you the game. Probably a terrible idea. So all these different factors lead to the Isle of Skye being in immense amount of game in a very short period of time. It plays in like a half hour to an hour, what they call like one of those really thinky fillers. And that's why I think, Andy, you were more positive on it during your second play. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
I would call Isle of Skye firmly a filler. Now, I'm reviewing its expansion, which is called Journeyman. And what Journeyman does is it adds a new phase and a new little piece. You have a physical piece that will move around, and you get like 4 movement points to move around your the tiles once you've laid them. Every time you move to a tile, you can use one of the features on that tile to then like advance your presence on 3 different tracks. And this will do things like unlock a scoring that'll happen for you every single round. So you'll start scoring 4 points at the start of every round. You'll start getting extra income. You'll start getting special abilities or one-time use abilities, like the ability to get these little roads that are new from this expansion, where you can actually, there are roads on the tiles in the base game, and there's no rule that you don't have to connect roads. But if you have a tile that you want connected to a road network and you have no other way of doing it, you can get a road and then place it in a later turn. So it's kind of cool. It adds the ability to sort of like bypass what otherwise would have been like, oh, I can't get the right thing for my tile draw. You then, if you can finally max out one of these 3 tracks by continually getting more and more features during each round when you send your journeyman on this like physical journey, you can then get these really impactful special abilities. Like, guys, your draw is about to drop. One of the special abilities is that you no longer have to pay any money for when you buy a tile. The bank pays for you. So you just buy whatever tile you want. One of the other abilities is that you no longer have to chuck one of your 3 tiles. You can have all 3 of them out there and all 3 of them be priced. One of the other special abilities is you can buy 2 tiles, not just 1 tile in a round. So these are really impactful special abilities. Cool things to unlock. But you're only going to get them in like maybe the 4th, 5th, or 6th rounds. Probably not going to get them in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd rounds. It'd be really, really incredible if you could. But it just leads to you having an extra decision to make about your tiles, right? Very frequently, what tiles come out are prioritized based on what scoring is available. And if there's no scoring for something, a tile could literally be like worthless, right? I mean, you could just not have anything on it. This gives something where every feature is going to be useful at some point for you. And you have ways to bypass, like ways to advance. Like let's say that on this track, I need to get a sheep and then a lighthouse and then a ship. Let's say I have no lighthouses. Well, I could actually go travel to a sheep, then back to my home castle where I have to pay money to use it as a wild and then move on to that lighthouse space and then travel further to get to a sailboat. So like you have abilities to like work around stuff that you don't have access to. But what this really does is it makes the game a puzzle. You are puzzling out every round. Like you get done with a round of Isle of Skye, usually it's just like, okay, what's the scoring? Now let's move on, right? The decisions have been made. Not with Journeyman. You're sitting there like, oh, what's the right thing to do? And you are literally puzzling it out. What's weird is that you're building this on top of what I would call a fairly light game. Usually when you add a bunch of heft onto a fairly light game, it makes that light game buckle. That's not what happens in Isle of Skye, Journeyman. The expansion somehow adds like this legitimacy to every tile. It makes every tile matter in a really interesting way. It's to me, it's ridiculous how crunchy it makes the game. But what it really does that's polarizing is it adds a ton to this game. Isle of Skye with the Journeyman expansion is not going to come out in the same times, like for the same reason that Isle of Skye would in my experience. I will never play Isle of Skye Journeyman instead of Isle of Skye. It's like I'm going to say, hey, let's play Journeyman to a group of people that maybe understand Isle of Skye and we want to play something crunchier. It's ridiculous how much game you got out of this small box. And the added time is very much worth it because it's like there's solid reasons for owning everything, which is not the case in Isle of Skye. Some of the things you want to move to are not just features. They're like a tile that has an enclosed mountain. So you're wanting to have an enclosed mountain and then travel your journeyman there. And it's really cool because you're like actually moving around your own place. It gives a reason for those tiles that you put in first round to matter beyond just like, okay, I got to count up everything and I've got 3 ships and that's how many points I get. No, now you're like, oh, how am I going to get back to that ship? And sometimes it'll be like, you got to get to the northernmost tile. And so it impacts how you build to put things next to each other and make sure that this row stays your southernmost row, because otherwise there's no way that you're going to get all the way over here and down here. And it gives you those extra things. Like there's always, it seemed to me like there was always a couple of ways that I could have built and then made my journey. And I always had to like, oh, what's the right thing to do? It was really, really cool. I thoroughly enjoyed the expansion, but it drastically changes the base game in such a way that I cannot recommend it if you want Isle of Skye to be this comfortable little filler. But if you want something more, I think that Journeyman actually elevates it to a medium weight game that is worth its time. And that's weird for me to say, because I usually wouldn't like that type of thing. Like if you were to say like, hey, let's add all the expansions to Arkham Horror, I'd be like, like let's add 6 hours to a game that's already fairly light. In Journeyman, you're doubling roughly the time of the game, but all of that added time is like you sitting there and everybody else simultaneously looking at their board trying to plan out a journey, and it feels like the game still is just really engaging, really great. I highly recommend it, with the caveat that you have to understand it's no longer a filler, the Isle of Skye Journeyman expansion. And it's fun. There you go, Mer. Fun.
It's streamlined.
I'm gonna bleep it out. I'm seriously gonna do that. I edit this. I'm gonna like make a little timestamp here. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna bleep out the word fun. You know what? It's the funnest game I've ever played in this fun hobby. Those are gonna get bleeped, or maybe they won't. We'll see. But that's not all of our reviews. We still have the most controversial review yet to come. Really? We're all going to clash in your review, TC.
We are. Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. So, just a little background information on this game. We did a top 10 with Jeff Gimble, and we had a big guessing game on what his number one game was. And we had our guesses, Village and all this stuff. And out of nowhere, he picked Clash of Cultures as his number one game.
I was blindsided by it.
I was like, what the heck? Really? And I remember playing this game like years and years and years and years ago. So I'm like, okay, I've got to play this again. I've got to keep an eye out. And strangely enough, as soon as that popped as a number one game, at my local game store, the store owner threw a few copies of Clash of Cultures on his super discount shelf, his 40% off shelf. So I'm like, okay, done, got it. We're gonna play this game. I want to remember this and see what's going on. So we sat around, we played it, and I have to say, I think I missed the boat first time around on this one. I don't think I gave this game what it was due. And I don't know why that is, but essentially in Clash of, I think what it was is that, okay, in Clash of Cultures, you start with the Civilization. It's a 4X game with a very heavy Euro-ish mechanics to it. So you start with a civilization, you have a starting place, and you have a whole bunch of tiles that are all foggy. You have to go out and explore it. So what you're doing, you're starting with a generic civilization, and you're not unique. You all start the same one. You both have like farming and something else, and then you build your culture up as you want to. And there is like just an insane amount of choice on how you build up. I mean, you look at this board, half the board is just empty squares where you put your cubes in to get the technology. And you're like, I have no idea where to even start. Do I want agriculture? Do I want science? Do I want to work for democracy? Do I want to be a theocracy? I have no idea. Oh, and look, I only got like 6 rounds and 3 turns to get something going here. But fortunately with the game, when you start off, you get an action card and an objective card. And where this game, I think, shines in particular is when you get an objective card, you have, first of all, it gives you direction to go to score victory points. You're like, oh, thank goodness, I have some kind of direction to go with my generic civilization that looks like everybody else's. But what's really cool about it is the objective card. You have 2 objectives you can do. You can do the peaceful weenie way, or the awesome TC aggro way.
Maybe a little bit of reviewer bias in that.
Yeah, just to give you an idea. So So I'm playing with some gamers. They're like, "Oh, we're going to do the little peaceful. We're gonna get like all 4-in-1 technology. 1-4, going to max that out and get 2 points, and you score your objective at the end of 3 turns." And I'm like, "Dude, screw that! I have this one objective. If I have 4 armies just right next to one of your cities, I'm going to score victory points." So everybody else is doing like this peaceful thing. I'm like building up these plastic soldiers and sending them out to like just go mess with everyone. And what was really interesting about that, and I think it makes for an interesting decision space in the game, is you can play this game however your group wants to. Like if you're with just a bunch of people who like, yeah, I just want to kind of build my civilization up and score points and kind of be peaceful, that's a completely legitimate strategy. If you want to be all aggro, you can do that too. However, if you have like a aggro player like me, that does change how other people are going to play, because the minute they see armies marching up to their city, they're going to kind of freak out and start building up their military too. The battle system's really clean. You just roll 1 die for each plastic soldier you have. You can have up to 4 in a space. You add it up, divide by 5, and that's how many hit points you inflict on either side. You keep going until you either retreat or you wipe someone out. Another interesting mechanic is like you can just culturally take over other people's cities a bit. So while they still get the benefit of that city piece, you're going to score victory points for that piece because it's your color now. So you can like have a big city and it's influencing the other cities in the area of different players. That was pretty slick. It's a really solid civilization game. The biggest downside to it is there was an expansion out for it that really you get a unique civilization like Egypt or Rome or something, but that expansion is so far out of print now. It's like $200 to $300, and they're never reprinting it. So I'm like, oh, well, that looks neat, but I'll never try it. Mm-hmm. But it would be a type of game I would love to take to like WBC with you, Joe, and Jeff, and just sit down with that game and just see how it plays out. It was interesting. I can see why Jeff would like that as a #1 game, because your play style can dictate the direction of the game, and it's pretty neat. So if you could find a copy and you're interested in a 4X style exploration game that doesn't take like 8 hours to play, because we played it in like 2 hours and that was a learning game, check this one out. I think it's worth your time, even though it's a game that came out in 2012, which makes it what? Well, we're 5 years old now.
6 years old, yeah. I guess. Five wow. Or 6, yeah.
Does it sound weird saying a 2012 game is an old game?
I suppose. I mean, it depends on how long, on whether or not you identify as somebody who's new to the hobby, and then whether or not, that 2012 was when you were in the hobby. So, I don't know. I mean, to me, 2012 is still recent, and this game, the game design itself is, it doesn't feel like an old game. I mean, when you say that, to me, it feels like a modern game. I would just say the expansion to this really raised it up a lot. Mm-hmm. Still not, not one that I ended up opting to keep. It's so long. Like the games that we played of it were like 3 hours plus, and with only the base game, you really don't get much. I mean, you get the players choosing their paths, but there's no like historical or civilization flavor specific to it. And that's what that expansion adds. It adds like 13 civilizations. So it's like crazy the amount of different civilizations, and they all have unique technologies. There's now like more things that make the combat much more than just like, like every plastic piece gets a die and then you add them all up and divide by 5. Like the combat gets a lot more like there's stronger units, and then there's counters to those stronger units. So I mean, it's one where you get even more directions you can head in, but then you're going to have like a certain sort of preferred mode of play based on the civilization you're playing in. So I would say that the expansion is necessary, and I'm pretty sure that Jeff has a copy of that. But I would totally play this. I just, to me, it's a really long game for being a Civ game, and a lot of it feels to me like a well portrayed mimic of like a game like Sid Meier's Civilization. But ultimately, I feel like I would just rather play Sid Meier's Civilization than I would play Clash of Cultures.
Wow, we actually played Clash of Cultures twice in one night, and we played our first game was like about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and the second game we ran through in about 45 minutes to an hour, and that was just the base game. Once we got the rules down, so that's
how many players?
We played. Both of them were 3-player games.
Okay. I say that the 3-hour game I've played was learning it, obviously. So like the second game would go a lot quicker, but that still seems like 45 minutes to an hour seems really quick.
Yeah, BGG lists it as 180 to 240 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, maybe 3 to 4 hours.
Maybe we were just real impatient with our turns. Like, I do this, and this. Match that. Okay, I do this, and this. Oh yeah, I do this, and this. Oh crap, it's time for our next turn. But we were booking it at that second.
Why don't you get over here and play with us, man? That sounds like a beautiful way to play. You sound like a gift to every gamer.
That's kind of like how me and Trent and whoever else joins us plays 18xx games. A lot of people are like, "Oh, this is going to take you like 8 hours the first time you learn it." We're like, "How long did it take us?" Like 5.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also caveat that with we probably played nowhere near competently, but I would rather play quickly than take forever. So,
and I think another reason why I played a little bit quicker is that one of the guys who we played with, he's like hardcore into Civilization style games. So I think a lot of those mechanics just clicked with them just innately. He's like, oh, this, okay, got it. And you know, it just seemed to flow pretty well because he was kind of used to the way those types of games flow. And he actually said he liked that better than the Fantasy Flight Civilization game, which I've never played, so I can't comment on.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's Clash of Cultures, which, I guess maybe it wasn't as controversial, but it's just, the way that it shocked me.
Yeah, I was like, what? The guy who designed Merchant Marauders? Really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was our reviews. And moving now into player interaction. So tonight we're going to talk about the way that games have you providing interesting sort of platforms of interaction, and what sort of mechanisms and design choices designers make to make a game have a unique feel to the way that you are, engaging with the players at your table. The reason I say indirect is I would almost say, and this is my topic, for the record, if you hate it, it's my fault. The main reason I wanted to say indirect is because I would say that like any time when a game has you playing as totally hostile towards other players, it's kind of like your mind is made up and it's more about how to pick them apart than it is really about how to interact with them in other, in varied ways. And so I would say that even if a game has interaction, I don't want to, if it has direct interaction, meaning like a battle, I don't want to totally like toss that to the side, right? I don't want to make this like, how do Euros interact with each other? Because I think that games are getting more and more interesting nowadays because even conflict games will include indirect ways that you can interact with other players so that you can form things like alliances. Sometimes the game actually has you doing that as a part of the game, like in the most recent huge Kickstarter from Cool Mini or Not to Deliver, Rising Sun. You've got other games that involve warfare, but you can kind of coexist peacefully with another player. And there's just some interesting ways. And like Twilight Imperium 3 or 4, whatever one, the 4 is the only one I've played, but like there's a lot of interaction in that game that isn't just kicking each other's faces in, like a trading of some sort. So even if a game includes direct interaction, I mean, when it comes down to it, there's only so much I really have to say about like, okay, well, you left yourself open here, or you well defended this and made me go elsewhere. Like there is, and maybe you guys can correct me and say that there's many different ways to interact in a direct combat setting. But what I find myself most engaged by is when a game has me sort of dealing with the same players that I'm punching. For direct conflict games. Now, of course, it doesn't have to have direct conflict, but I wanted to see, like, what games do you guys feel are the most interactive games that do not, as their core mechanism, feature, like, fighting each other? I'm cool with talking about other ones, but I'm just like, what if I were to say, like, what's the most interactive game that doesn't have battles? Where would you go?
John Company.
You know I'm a war gamer. That's going to be a really challenging question, Joe.
Hell, John Company.
Yeah, like that, or an Infamous Traffic.
Infamous Traffic. Yeah.
John Company, you're trying to work together insofar as to skim off the company, and depending on which scenario you're playing, crashing it before anyone can catch up with you. I can see that.
Yeah. And Infamous Traffic would be, yeah. There's that one's sandboxy enough to have some interesting interaction because you could play that game completely nice. You could be like, hey, I'll have my little area, I'll have your little area. We'll work together. This will be great. And then you put a player like me in, and then I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm going to undercut your ship.
I mean, I remember the first time I played 1846 and someone crashed a company, and I was up in a position where I had to pick it up, and it was a bunch of garbage. That was a pretty indirect interaction. It's just like, oh, by the way, you own the most shares of this. I just tanked it. It has no trains. Here, it's yours now. Deal with it. Like, oh, I guess that's a thing.
So are 18xx games the most? Is selling another player's company, like if another player is the head of a company and they own shares in a company, is selling their shares direct or indirect interaction?
It depends what you're wanting to do with it. Because if it's a matter of it could be both really, because in a matter of it, like if I'm at the stage of the game where I'm just trying to improve my portfolio, like I have no care whether your company is X, Y, or Z. I just know I can sell this stock to get this better stock. That's more indirect interaction. But depending on how much shenanigans that type of game allows, you can do things like, okay, your stock's actually going to make me money, but I want to have my company go first so I can cut your root off there. Yeah, I'm going to sell 2 of your shares.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're selling as a weapon rather than as a tool for yourself. So it could be kind of both depending on the game. But I would say the more the game leads to a stock market style game, the more interaction period you're going to have of the direct interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying there, Andy, in terms of that there is it could be directly impacting and hurting a player. Mm-hmm. But so is indirect interaction at any level, is it like a gray area where there's sort of it gets further and further and further towards the point where there's a battle that happens, and then it becomes direct? Or is it like this is indirect interaction, this is not anything direct about it? I mean, ultimately, if a game is a competitive game, isn't every form of indirect interaction eventually you can kind of push, kind of connect the dots and say, yes, it's not point A to point B, but it's the same sort of idea.
Maybe it's more about intention, because there are some games out there. Yokohama comes to mind really well, where you can you need to go to this space to make I need to go to this space to do this action because it's benefit me. The side effect of that is that nobody else can go to that place to do the action. So I go do it, and I'm doing it to directly benefit me, but indirectly I just screwed someone else who wanted to go there, even though I didn't know he wanted to go there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. But what if you did know that he wanted to go there? And that's where I think the magic moment for me in determining which types of that indirect interaction, when Andy, I've noticed this. When you're playing a train game or an economic game, I usually hear some wicked laugh emerge. When it's
yeah. That
one, exactly. Yeah. On command. And it's like when he starts talking about it, it's like, this is how you can interact. And here's what makes me laugh and smile like that inside. And that's when I'm watching somebody, for example, my wife, who's very uninteractive, very much just wants to have her cake and wants you to have your cake. And then my cake will be slightly maybe better than yours, but it's not that big of a deal if it's not. And we'll all get done and we'll all have had cake and be really happy. But what really makes me smile is when I notice my wife has looked at her options and figured out that nothing here is really going to hurt or help her any more than anything else. And then her eyes wander from her tableau or her playing area, whatever, over to mine. And it's like, what do you want? And that to me, like that moment, that magic moment when it's like, hold on, what can I do to you using the tools this game has given me? That really makes me like, it's like, that's that moment when I'm like, yes, like we're actually interacting here. This isn't just us sitting down at a table and then doing our own stuff. Like you actually just got inside my game. And that to me is hilarious. It just like, it just immediately paints a smile on my face. What do you guys think?
Well, I've had that happen a few times in Dominion where someone sees the strategy I'm going for. I'm like, oh, he wants those cards. So they like start depleting the deck of cards I want to put into my hand. I'm like, oh, crap. Well, there goes that. Now I got to figure out something else to do. I've had that happen. Like, oh, that's why you want those cards. Well, I want them too. And then they're gone. I'm like, well, crap. I got to find out something else to do.
A lot of times as a newer player, I feel like I'm paying really a close attention to anybody I regard as a better player. Like there's one specific player that I play with that's helps to play test them, and every time I see him do something, I'm like, okay, what did he do?
Why are you doing that? There's a reason. Okay, you got something up your sleeve. Yeah,
that's kind of more just like me following behind, like follow the leader. It's like I trust your judgment more than I trust mine. In Dominion, you can, to a large extent, copy the other players. So I do kind of like play that copycat game. And sometimes I don't even mean to, but then there are cards where like, the more that you have of them, the better they can be. And so if you see somebody going for them out of the gate, you need to be there. Otherwise, like if you miss the window of opportunity to start throwing curse cards into the decks of your opponents, other people get on top of it, you'll just end up with just such disappointment. And they'll be able to pump more, because ultimately in any heavy curse game, that deck is going to be gone, right? Like deck is running out, and that's what's going to be the reason that you have less or more cards is like that deck is going to be gone. It's how's it getting distributed. So because if we're doing it equally, then we're keeping pace. But if somebody hits that witch much earlier, if somebody finds a path to get to the witch earlier and they hit that out of the gate, it can be a much more difficult game. So, but I mean, like is that. Because in Dominion, any interaction affects the whole table. I don't think of Dominion as like an interactive game, but more like it's like we're all sort of solving a puzzle together. And what players can do can impact like that solution is not necessarily fixed as in like it's here. It can change based on what strategy other players are doing. But I feel like it's more of an adjustments game. It's not like when you look at another player, like let's say you're playing something like Ticket to Ride, and you look at another player's like all of their trains, you're like, I think you're going from here to here, and then you go there. You
play Ticket to Ride the people who know those maps, and they can like, oh, I know where you're going. Wrong. Like, oh, okay, guess that's done.
But like, okay, so let's bring back in here. Let's bring back in, like ways that let's talk about how indirect interaction can fuel a direct conflict. And I want you guys to see how far you can get on the topic of coin games.
Okay.
So how does indirect interaction fuel those games? How does, because, I mean, if you, forces in a coin game, the idea of a coin game for anybody inexperienced in them is that you got 4 asymmetric sides that are all sort of pushing and pulling. And some games maybe have less, maybe you have 3 players or 2 players, but generally the idea is it's asymmetry. And there's a certain element of coexistence and mutual, there are different symbiotic and parasitic relationships that emerge throughout the game that are kind of historically accurate portrayals of the way that this group, the mafia maybe, and the government of Cuba interacted with each other, while other forces were sort of the antagonists of that alliance. So how does your interaction with your allies / enemies, how can these weird alliances form in a coin game setting?
Which coin game you want me to address? I could talk about the one I have the most experience seeing this with is Andy and Abyss. That is by far the coin game I have played the most, simply because it was the first one. And in your typical coin game, your more traditional ones, you have like one government that's like really, really, really powerful. It can like just decimate any one faction at will, literally, if you play it right. But the key is that you have three other minor factions, and then Ending Abyss, I know the FARC was one. There was the cartels and the yellow one. I can't think. It eludes me. Anyway, you're trying to keep your eye as a government player, and being the government is like really tricky in this game. You're like trying, okay, I got to keep an eye on all this. And basically you're playing a really complex version of whack-a-mole at that point. You're like, okay, right. Like the cartels, they're looking bad. I'm just going to send a missile over there and like destroy their lab. Boom. Right. Oh, the FARC, they're getting too big. They're causing too much political unrest over here. That's messing with me. I got to go like expose some of those, militia there. I got to flip them over so I can wipe them off the face of the earth. And here comes this, because of the yellow faction. God, I can't think of what it was. They're like this weird, like you kind of want them to help you, but you kind of don't. So yeah, and so like at any particular point in that game, alliances are going to shift, because basically if you're not playing the government, you're trying to like hide and be productive and like, don't look at me, look over there, look at what this person's doing, and like swing around for a victory in the propaganda phase whenever that pops up. And you kind of have an idea when that's going to happen. So yeah, it's just that game shifts so right. And there's a lot of direct interaction, but the indirect interaction in that game is trying to look as non-aggressive to the big player as possible to swing out for a win.
A really, really interesting and intriguing portrayal of that, TC. I could picture the things. Your sound effects actually help them too. The rocket.
Yeah, wait, I'm in the government, and you're running the government. You're like, dude, I've got all this money. This will be amazing. And it's like, oh, that cost me 3. That cost me 3. That cost me. Oh, I'm down. Oh crap! I don't get this till I don't get more money till the propaganda phase, and I just spent all my actions taking out the cartels, which actually helped the FARC people. Oh, I made a big mistake.
Yeah. Well, what you've just said here, I want to segue into something from our chat here. Murr's favorite game, one of his favorite games, is Cosmic Encounter. I think it's his #1 game. And when you boil it down, if you take all the indirect interaction out of Cosmic Encounter, it is a game of war, literally a game of war, where all you're doing is flipping a card, or you get dealt a hand of cards and you play a card face up or face down and then see what's the higher number. So it's the indirect interaction that makes this a classic game that has stood the test of time and has been around now for over 40 years. Because you have this opportunity to bring anybody who you want on your side, and then your opponent is going to have the same idea, the same thing, right? The one thing that the game does is it tells you like you're attacking this person. It doesn't allow you like the ability to just target the leader or target anybody. It's like, this is who you're attacking based on what the fate deck says. But the way that the players use indirect interaction and negotiation to balance that out is really where the heart of the game lies. And now here's what I think fuels, to a certain extent, guys, I have a statement, and I want you guys to evaluate it. Any game that totally lacks hidden information can only have so much indirect interaction. Like
my response to that is diplomacy. What's hidden in diplomacy?
Well, your orders are hidden.
Yeah, diplomacy, what's hidden is what you're promising the other people at the table.
What you actually do is what's hidden.
That's true in a lot of games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like, the actual move that you take, like, because of the simultaneous
it's like
writing
saying,
of orders.
Okay, but that's saying that any simultaneous action selection game would also be true of, like Race for the Galaxy.
That's true. I think that by making the order simultaneous in diplomacy, it prevents retaliation from moves, right? You have to like recollect and figure out what you're going to do when you get stabbed in the back. And usually there's not much you can do. But if it wasn't interactive, if it wasn't simultaneous, what ends up happening is a big game of tit for tat. It could, at least. It could devolve into like, okay, you're the first player. Well, here's what I would do. In a game that's about interaction, that has this strong forms of interaction, strong indirect interaction or direct interaction, if you go first and you choose not to attack me, and you are now one action, like if you think about your turn as a resource, which I think we should start doing that, like, we do resource management, and the turn itself is a resource. Well, you've just spent your most precious resource not attacking me. If I attack you, I now have extra resources because you used your turn to not attack me, and I'm now getting the first hit on you. Now, obviously, there's other things that can happen, but what do you guys think about that? That any game where you have non-simultaneous turns, that the indirect interaction can be limited unless you've got sort of hidden motives and hidden goals.
I'm still trying to figure out the hidden information in diplomacy, because the thing that really gets me about diplomacy, the thing I love to do in that game, is to just take someone at the table and go to a different room and say nothing, and then come back, and everyone's paranoid about what you just said with this person and think you got some kind of crazy when you said absolutely nothing. And that whole game comes down to trust and paranoia to a large extent. Right?
You just walk into another room, sit there and say nothing.
And say nothing. And then you come out and they're like, oh my God, what is TC going to do? What is France going to do with Spain? They just sat in there for 5 minutes and they got some kind of big plan.
Oh man, I would consider that absolutely hostile. That's just jamming it in your face, I'm gonna kill you. Especially from you, TC. And then the other person says, "You're gonna kill me."
And then the other person says, "We didn't say anything." I said, "Yeah, I keep saying that. That's what we agreed to say."
Keep saying that. That's what we agreed to say. That's hilarious. Oh my goodness, TC. You go into another room playing diplomacy, say nothing, and then when the other person tells the truth, you call them out for lying?
Yeah.
What?
It's an absolutely viable strategy, especially if you got people around the table who are just completely paranoid of what kind of crap's going to come down their way when we do our no move.
What did you guys say in that room? Nothing? Oh yeah, you just keep saying, TC, that is hilarious.
And but and like you say, everything's just done at once, so there's no chance for you take back. But then you recoup. So I don't know. That's my personal take. I don't know if that answers the question at all, but. So that's a nice point, Trent. I'm glad you brought up diplomacy.
It's the best.
It's really interesting because if you take away the diplomacy minus simultaneous orders, how would that impact the game? How would that impact the way that you're interacting?
That's kind of like what Intrigue is.
Okay, I've never played Intrigue.
I think you need to imagine a cross of diplomacy and For Sale.
Because the designer of For Sale, Stefan Dora, For Sale, the small auction selling properties, selling properties game, it's designed by him, which is just, to me, that's just ridiculous. And designed in 1994. We maybe should try this one sometime. But Trent, do you ever experience this in a game like what I'm talking about, where when somebody takes an aggressive action, it kind of it's almost like their own funeral, where they did something and now the whole table is it's like they almost lost the upper hand. Yeah, they lost
you gotta time that kind of move. If you mistime it, then it's going to cost you the game. If you time it right, you can win the game with it. That's the trick with that.
Andy, would you say that same sort of trick could exist in an 18xx game in terms of when you use the trust that other players maybe have or haven't put into you, in terms of when they see you buying shares in their company?
Oh yeah. In a lot of them, I play with local gamers who know me. They'll start buying stock, and then they'll look over at me and they're like, "Yeah, I'm only buying one share of your."
Yeah, and it's Trent. You've played Here I Stand, right?
Yes.
It's been a long time since I played it, but I seem to recall that there is a turn order in that game. But you also have and in that game you can also take another faction aside and say "Hey, Holy Roman Empire, don't worry, I'm Spain. We're going to work together on this thing." And you can come back, and then you have to. And then everybody takes their turn. But then again, that agreement's only as good as your word on it.
Yeah, there's a negotiation phase, if I remember right. It's 10 minutes, go negotiate.
Yeah, and it's completely open. You can head off to another area of the house. You can be at the table. But I don't recall, that, because if you totally screw someone over that way in that game, turn order does become hugely important because you don't want to do that before the person you screwed over took an action.
For sure, yeah. The timing is huge, and that's why I think like in hidden trader games, sometimes you end up with that sort of like, if a game has a timing window like Dead of Winter, where sometimes one player will take like the last action of a round and then be very soon, higher up in turn order in the next round. Or they'll be the last one to take an action before like a whole bunch of resolution happens. And it's like, that's the window of opportunity. We're going to jump in and do all the harm, because otherwise players have the ability, these capabilities to sort of mitigate what damage they can do. So I guess when it comes down to it, I want a game that's going to make me get into the heads of my opponents. And that's kind of like one of the main reasons I want to sit down and play, to sort of like pick apart your brain, because then in a way that's like a challenge in and of itself. But also, like, sometimes I get to the point where I know what they're headed for, and I'm looking down and I'm like, okay, I'm picking apart their brain right now, not because I think I'm going to win, but because I want to learn how to do what they just did, like kind of like analyzing like what's their motivations. So, that sort of interaction can be, a game that just pushes you forward to like, I think that's why I maybe gravitate towards like something that has hidden information that's only given to one player but applies to everybody. To take one of the least interactive, there's not very much strong interaction in the most recent game from Uwe Rosenberg called Newsfjord. It's a fishing game. You have like 3 actions on your turn, 3 workers, and you can place these on a public board, and you can even get like sort of private spots that only you have access to, which makes it even less interactive than many worker placement games. But one thing that it does to try to get you in the heads of your opponents, and it's very clear in the rule book that this is how you're supposed to play, is the end game scoring cards are kind of dealt like Keyflower. In Keyflower, you deal tiles to every player, and in the last round, players can choose they must choose at least one, but they can choose multiple cards that become available, or multiple tiles that become available that are like end game scoring. And so from the start at least one subset of what could be scoring in the end of this game. But other players have that information, and as well as some control over what gets played or what doesn't. Now in Newsfjord, you're going to draw these cards a little bit into the game, so not quite at the beginning, but then all of your cards become available. The only advantage you have is that you have the ability to tailor your play more towards that card earlier on. And you're probably not going to get all of your own cards, and they're probably not going to sync up identically to each other. But like it's just interesting because the game wants you to get in the head of your opponents by seeing how they've changed their actions once they draw those cards. And I prefer the interaction of Newsfjord where you have that information and you're forced to play them all. So it's like the game wants you to get in the head of your opponent, but doesn't want your opponent to just be like, oh, well, this card would help him, I'm not going to play it. And that's where I think that like I've cooled a little bit on what Keyflower offers, because it's like I feel like, oh, well, if you have if you got dealt the tile for this, then you just have the ability, you have control over whether or not this scores. Does that make sense, guys? Like in Keyflower, if I see that you got a hold of the tiles that score for this thing and I'm holding the big scoring tile, I'm just not going to put that in the game. And to me, that's not really that much interaction. That's just like making a pretty obvious decision.
That's like denial.
Yeah, not exactly. Is denial a stronger or weaker form of interaction than trying to observe play? I mean, obviously, I think the way that I'm saying it is very biased. Would you guys agree that observation and need to sort of like, intuit what another player is preparing for so that you can also prepare for that because it might affect you as well is a more nuanced and more deep form of interaction than just straight up denial?
I don't know about that. I guess it depends on the game and what you can do with it. So like, I think I would prefer a situation where, the bluffing component can come in. Like, the thing that could be fun in that is if you have a scoring situation where, let's say, it could be this way or it could not. Maybe it's in the game, maybe it's not. Maybe in a game where I had the resources to make you think that that tile is in the game, for example. So I'm leading you down a path because you're trying to get in my, oh, he's going for that. And then it can kind of become a, I know that you know that I know. And that makes it interesting, where if you know that this has to be in the game somewhere, then
no, Andy, it's not that it has to be in the game somewhere. It's that, here's the thing, not all of the scoring cards will be in every game of News Fjord. That's part of like it has to be. It does not have to be a certain subset. Like, thing is, in a 3-player game, the deck is 14 cards, and you're only going to play with 9 of them. So there's 5 of them that are not in the game, 9 of them that are. So you only know 3 of those 9 that are in the game. The other players have the other ones. So I mean, there's about as many cards that are not going to score as there are that will score that you don't know. So yes, that's a very key component, because it's like, does he have this? Does he not have this? And people have different play styles to sort of try to mislead you and then hold on to enough resources to make that sort of coup de grace at the end of the game when it's like, kaboom. And by the way, I am pronouncing that correctly. I took a French class and they gave me crap for saying coup de grace before I started saying it differently. So anyway, it's to me like the ability to deny and the ability to directly interact really kind of can create a situation where it's just like, there's nothing I can do about it. Right. And if there's nothing you can do about it, is that interaction? All
I have to say about that is that in Seven Wonders, I turned hate drafting into a beautiful form of art that no one wanted to sit next to me. I consider that very much direct interaction if I'm hate drafted. That and in Terraforming Mars, if you go out of your way just to deny someone some stuff, just to be that, I think that's fairly direct. But then again, I got into a position where no one wanted to sit next to me in Seven Wonders on either side, even though because it swapped either way. It's like, I ain't sitting next to TC.
Well, in Terraforming Mars, like, I would tend to do that too, because if you're using the draft variant, there'd be a lot of times where I'm like, I only know I'm buying 2 out of my 4 cards. Okay.
And you can just pitch the rest of them. Yeah.
Yeah, these are the 2 I want. And then I look at the ones I've got. Who's going to be the most benefited? Yeah, I'm going to keep this card.
Yeah, and guess what? I'm just gonna, and then you can go, see this card? You wanted this? I'm just discarding it. Bam! Ha ha! That's a very fine art form. I hate drafting, and if you can refine that well enough, it is very direct interaction, I would argue.
Well, let's say, for example, like in Isle of Skye, you are tile drafting. Like, it's drafting. On your turn, you get to pick one of those out there. Like, choosing a tile based on what's going to help you most and hurt your opponents most is kind of part of the art form, right? What I like is that Isle of Skye has you making a decision about how much you're going to value something before you even put it out there. And then you only get to buy from one person on your turn. Now, this can kind of backfire and become frustrating, because if you're playing like a multiplayer game and they choose all of your tiles, you're usually sitting there just like,
well, I got money.
The last round. Yeah, and in the last round, there's nothing you can do with your money. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's like, okay. But I don't know. I feel like there's just still, the more variables you add to it, the more potentially clunky and weird it gets, but also the more potential for really having something to take away when you see the way that all these variables of interaction are playing together and mixing together in that melting pot that is the game. You really come out with something that you can take with it. You can take with you from it, and take with you from that interaction that grows you closer to other players and grows you closer to knowing and understanding like the inner workings of their brain, those machinations that you really should be trying to pick apart as you play.
Yeah.
So,
and one thing I think for interaction for me though is, if interaction becomes too much in Headspace, I start to dislike it. So I like to get into the headspace, but I like to have some kind of thing to base what I'm planning to do on. So like one thing I guess I can think of, putting this in a card game metaphor, is, I used to occasionally play poker when I was a kid with the family or whatever. And the thing I hated absolutely the most was like the 5-card draw and you don't have any idea what cards anyone has. Like I loathed playing that version. But when you get like Texas Hold'em, when you can start to reveal info and you're like, okay, what are the odds they actually have this? And then you kind of can use that information with the mind games to make a better judgment of what's going on. And I think I tend to prefer ones more in that setting. You know, like I said, John Company, like based on kind of what you're playing around with, I might have an idea of what your attempt to get the money is, and I might be able to do something about it. Now, you could be leading me down a BS path or something like that. But that's where I found maybe like, for me, I don't know, like before I make a full judgment, I want to play diplomacy in real life. But for me, at least the one time we tried it, that felt like it was getting more in the head, too much on the spectrum of being in the head space to where I'll like wear down on that after a while. But I don't know, I guess for the interaction, I prefer to have some form of information to base that on.
Sure, yeah, and I think you prefer that information to be open. Because Andy, like an 18xx game has very heavy interaction, as you described. It almost borders on being just direct, you know, directly impacting something that somebody's partially invested in, and or maybe fully, you know, as much as they could be. But like, here's the thing, like, I think you enjoy that sort of interaction, but in a game like like you guys mentioned the word sandboxy. For you guys, the sort of unknown information comes from just the amount of possibilities and the murkiness of the play space, not so much the murkiness of an element of uncertainty. So the more certainty you get, the more interesting that sort of like predicting your opponents gets, to that point where like in 18xx games, there's nothing hidden, there's nothing random. It's all out there on the table. The only thing you can't predict is what your opponents are going to do, which is probably unpredictable to a certain extent because it's going to depend on what you do. Right? Everything is going to, you know, that sort of like butterfly wings or, you know, the ripple effect. And I think that, you know, you see like a really heavy inside the head interaction to a different level, you know, to where like when you see a single move that people are doing, you're probably thinking two things. First of all, what's he doing or what's she doing? And how am I going to come out on top because of this? And it's like that's that sort of space that you're in. And that's definitely a level of interaction of being in their head, but it's not just about that head space. You know, it's not like they know information, I need to pick out what it is. It's like, you know, they might have an idea of a strategy, but that's going to be, you know, kind of up in it's going to be in the ether until it becomes their turn when they finally lay it out. And at that point, you know, I'm playing defense maybe. So yeah, it's interesting. And I kind of wonder, you know, like to me, when I think about the strongest interaction, it involves some element of of another player having information that's actually game information and not just, you know, their personality, their disposition, but having some sort of a game information that I need to deduce from what they're doing, you know? So I don't know. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's the way people should feel. It's really
interesting you bring that up, Joe. And maybe Trent can get on this one a little bit. But I've played enough Legend of the Five Rings where if I'm playing against an opponent, and you know those decks are, you know, you don't see them. They build their decks, and so you really largely don't have an idea of what they're doing. But as soon as I play a particular clan, and I see that clan that has a specific splash, I have a pretty good idea what's going to start hitting me in that conflict deck and what I need to do to prepare myself against it. Like if I'm playing crab and I see a unicorn splash, I know what's coming and I know what I got to do to get on top of what's coming my way. Now that's just being familiar enough, playing the game enough to seeing these things happen by playing it over and over and over and over again. I guess that's what you call a meta to a large extent.
Yeah.
But so maybe the same thing can be applied to like an 18xx game where like if you see something going on and you've seen it happen before, you have a pretty good idea what's about getting ready to hit and how to prepare yourself for it.
Oh,
have you had that happen with you, Trent?
Yeah, I mean that's meta is a common thing in pretty much any game where you go build decks and go to events. You often have a good idea what other players playing just by like the first round or two. You know what they're going to more or less be doing most of the time.
And I would say even in the shenanigans of the 18xx games, yeah, if someone looks like they're trying to manipulate turn order like around mid-game and they have one company that looks like it's really running low on cash and another company they're just starting, you sometimes start looking at that turn order and go, okay, how is priority deal going to come out of this? Because if you misjudge that, then next stock round you end up owning a worthless company.
Yes, I know that. That's like
how often is the die already been cast by the time that like how often is there a situation at the table? And this is the way I felt. Like you brought up in Infamous Traffic as being one of the most interactive games that doesn't just have outright war. How often does it happen when a player makes a move and you just look at it and you're like, okay, this is what's going to happen to me. This has been done. You know, and maybe priority deal came out of the last round in that direction, and the other player knew that it was going to happen. They've had this in their mind. You know, to what extent are you just now? Is this the big reveal of the dastardly plan?
Well, the thing with it is if you get a company dumped on you in an 18xx situations, you allowed that to happen because you ultimately have to have enough shares in that company for them to do it to you. So if you're looking at a company, because very rarely, unless someone's just playing weird, they're not going to dump a company on you that's a pretty valuable company. So ideally, you should be able to see what they're kind of playing around with, and then you've got the decision of, do you want to be greedy and hold on to those shares, or do you want to be preemptive and go, no, not feeling that. I'm going to get down to 1. But I mean, you have the option to see that basically an 18x. If a company got dumped on you, it's because you didn't pay attention to see what they were doing. You didn't know what they were doing because you're too new, or you got greedy.
Or you got
and allowed it to happen.
Or you got conned. You got conned into it.
Where they're like, oh, no, totally not going to sell this. Yeah, whatever. No, I'm out of this. Done. Sale. But I think in an Infamous Traffic, its nature is just a little bit more opaque. But you have to have some expectations in that game too. Like if you're sitting on your nice cushy supply chain with your level 3 ship, and you're thinking, oh, I'm making all kinds of money, and then you see the next guy go, I'm going to invest in a ship. You have to be able to think, hey, he could just cut me right out of that chain at any time. Do I lower prices? Is he going to go over here? But I mean, you kind of have an idea it's coming, and you could possibly preempt that by lowering your own prices ahead of time. I think I prefer that kind of interaction too, where it is about ultimately, do I see what you're thinking about? Like, I don't so much prefer the interaction of like, oh, I do this thing to you. Oh, looky, I had this cool special power card that now prevents you from doing that and makes it turn on you.
Well, what about a game like Letters from Whitechapel, where there's no randomness whatsoever in the game? The only uncertainty is, you know, the chess game that is, where is Jack the Ripper at?
Yeah. Well, if we go by that one, my wife is frighteningly good as Jack the Ripper in that game, and that means I have no idea what's going on in my wife's head, which is kind of a scary place for me to be right now.
How does your crawl space smell okay, TC?
I don't know. I mean, every time we play that, she owns us as Jack the Ripper, and we are like, just okay. That's an interesting. That game in particular is an interesting. I mean, I play a hidden movement game, and people are like, "You're there, TC." I'm like, "You're right."
See, I did once. If going really old school, the old Starfleet battle system, we were playing. I was playing a Romulan warship, going up against a couple other ones. But in this specific scenario, you played with the cloaking device as you should, i.e., my shields go down, and then I take my piece off the board and I start writing down hex numbers of where I'm actually going. But my way of messing with them is I could tell they were trying to see where my eyes were. So I would purposely look at one corner on the board while writing down the numbers from another place. And so they would be like, oh, he's up in the corner. And then they'd turn their ships around, and then I'd decloak right on their butt.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, what the? How did you? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I saw what you were doing. Have fun.
Yeah.
There's a plasma torpedo.
And that thing, Letters from Whitechapel has like, its own little map, so they can't, do that to you.
Yeah.
And for Dracula, I bought like a second an upgrade, so I would have my own map. But I like Fear of Dracula is a little different because you can actually be more aggressive as Dracula in that game and take out the hunters. And Letters from Whitechapel, you are just hightailing it out of there after the murder and trying to get away. And for some reason, that pure state of game just really clicks with Carissa. And I would
to me, like it just sheds all of this unnecessary stuff and just makes it about that interaction, about the head game, about the cat and mouse. And to me, that is, like, I don't think there is a more pure hidden movement game. I don't think there can be one than Letters from Whitechapel, solely because that's, I mean, you could make more maps to it, but that's as pure as it gets, just about.
Yeah, but yeah, to trying to get into a headspace in that game, it's like it's hard to do, but it's good. It's good. And it kind of scares you when someone's like, you're really good at Jack the Ripper. Oh my God, I'm married to you.
Well, Scotland Yard, to a similar extent, it's Scotland Yard is a little bit less high stakes because you have these intervals at which you have to reveal like where you were if you were Mr. X. And so it's just a lot like, it's more like you start, even if you're doing terrible, you're still going to get helped out by the game. In Letters from Whitechapel, you're doing terrible. It sucks to suck.
Yeah, you just keep doing, because if you're doing terrible, you just wait to the next murder and maybe try to do better. I think we're there. I think you escaped. But what?
Where were you? Where were you? How is that possible?
And then you argue about it, and you just see my wife just smiling. Like, oh,
nice. That'd be awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, we've gotten a little bit of onto our carriages here to talk a little bit about Letters from Whitechapel. But I really do think, like, these are different ways in which you can get inside the headspace of an opponent. And sometimes that's nice when there's a blind there in the case of Letters from Whitechapel, and that is where the game space exists. Sometimes like a game of chess or a game of 18xx, everything is laid out, but what's in your opponent's head in terms of where they're going and what their plans are and what they were hoping to do can really create a huge platform for interaction. And then just a lot of times the game facilitates this in some really unique ways. Andy, yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to share like my favorite headspace chess story, because my wife watches a lot of like the chess tournaments that are like the top 10 players in the world, which used to be really boring, but in America, in St. Louis, when they do it, they've added these things to like spice it up. Like they got a guy who talks chess like a football announcer. But the best thing they ever added was like the confessional booth for like like a reality television thing.
Like post game,
No, not post game. During the game, you can get up and leave and go in it at any time. Because sometimes it's an hour before your next move, right? But
holy crap! Seriously, they sit there and stare at the board for an hour?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Psycho string time.
There was once when it was like these two guys. I think one was the number 1, one was the number 3, and the number 3 guy made a move. And then looked at it for a minute, kind of nodded his head, got up, walked off to like, let this guy, the number 1 player, think, wandered over to like the silent booth, got in and just went,
That's awesome.
But he couldn't let him know it. So
the other guy couldn't hear it though. It's like the soundproof.
He was just in the silent room shouting the F word because he knew he had screwed up. So
he's like, fun!
Then he walks back all serious again and sits down and continues to stare at the board.
Oh boy. Well, that's some interesting interaction there, Andy. It really is. When you take away the randomness, you can end up with just a ton of space to explore. And when you give information to players but force them to conceal it, for their own best interests, you can end up with some interesting things to explore. And I mean, this is not by any means a comprehensive list of different ways that interaction happens. It's just like, it's an interesting topic, to think about, like, what are we doing? We're engaging in a hobby that puts us in close proximity to other people. And I enjoy for that to be something mentally as well as physically. So thanks, guys, for participating in this discussion. Let's move on here into our hype. And I wanted to use my hype game as a bit of a bridge between, like this hype section, because I wanted to talk about the interaction here. I got a game called MOA, and the idea is it's about like all these endemic birds to New Zealand, these endemic flightless birds, like the moa, which is now extinct and has been since like the 1400s. But like there's like the kakapo, which is one that still exists, the kiwi that they're so, that's like their mascot. But all these animals, all these birds, all represent different groups, or I guess like you're sort of indigenous people on the island of New Zealand, the islands, I should say, the archipelago. And you are going to have mammals that are coming in that are like representative of the different powers that came to sort of colonize New Zealand. And what's really interesting to me is that all the interaction in this game is indirect. Like you are not able to directly attack any of your opponents in the game. It's the map itself on which you play looks somewhat like Small World, but there's different terrains, and then every round 2 terrain cards will be drawn, and that's the only type of terrain that you can interact with. And you're going to have a hand of 9 cards that at the start of every round, and that's all you get. Like those 9 cards are what you get. And so some cards will be better for like battling. And when I say battling, I mean you're battling the mammals that are coming. Other cards will actually let you pay like your honor. Like you literally have to pay. Honor is a resource in this game that you can pay to do what's called sell the territory. And that is as bad as it sounds. Like you are literally selling it to the European power, like, to one of there's weasels there, all of them are like these sort of invasive species that are like the mammalian species that ended up really wreaking havoc on New Zealand's bird population. And so it uses this cutesy art. And here's the thing, Andy, as I was reading about this, I kept thinking like, this sounds like almost like something Cole Worley would design, especially when you see his latest design, Root, because that whole idea is his taking, like mixing together like the red wall, the red wall theme of like anthropomorphic animals and rodents, and like sort of a woodland setting, woodland creatures setting, and then taking it and applying it to like this otherwise geopolitical, like sandboxy asymmetric battleground. And this here is like it's an area control game. So think like El Grande, where having the most pieces is a really good thing. But the way that like the game sort of dictates where you can go every round, and the way that the game sort of randomizes, it uses like, it's almost like an AI that you're playing against, where the AI is going to build up different, it's going to build up and then it's going to come out. So the AI is the mammals, and there's like a deck of cards that are these terrain cards that occasionally these mammals will come out, they'll stack up, and then they'll come and rush and they attack in a specific set numerical order based on these territories. To me, a lot of it, like if you take away the animals and you just make this about the people, about like the indigenous people in New Zealand, and you make it like legitimately, instead of the bad guys being mammals, you make them the actual powers. You could slap Cole Worley's name on this and it would feel like, yeah, it's interesting. Why are we talking about animals when the real theme is like, this is a really sensitive political topic, a really sensitive and sad topic that it's just better if we have cute looking things. But really, like, here's, to me, the connection that's really cool and that I really like about this design is that it works on that animal level as well, because these animals literally went extinct as a result of European settlers. Literally, many of these animals did. So you have that. So it's not just like, hey, cutesy animals, and we're going to make them, like we're going to do that. So it's kind of like this diplomatic way of doing things. No, this is like commentary in a cutesy art way. So I'm engaged in it. I'm not certain exactly how much I'm going to end up loving the entire game, the entire system. There's not like that sort of replayability that I've been enjoying from Martin Wallace's recent other games, like A Study in Emerald, where you just got this huge deck of cards that is going to change the way every game feels. The games are going to be very similar to one another, but to me, like the actual idea of like this like you can sell out to the colonizers. You can do that, and sometimes that's going to be what's best for you based on the resources you draw, the cards that you draw that are all represented by birds. So that's why my hype is MOA, where it's like you can't directly interact with other players, but you're doing it in a weird like having the most points, but then you can sell out, and then sometimes you'll sell out because that really hurts another player more than it hurts you because they're much more invested in this area. Plus, there's a volcano that can explode, which, Andy, I know how much you love 1849. So,
if we got volcano, that's one of my favorite elements from Dominant Species.
Yes, and this is like, it's like the most lucrative spot on the board, but once it goes, it goes. You just like lose everybody there.
Well, you got me at Wallace Design. I want to try this. I've heard rumblings of this, but I haven't had anyone actually play it yet. So I
just got it in the mail
about it is it's kind of like based on Liberté.
I could see that, yeah, a little bit. Liberté is more about like having dudes on the board and then moving them around. Like here, you're maybe. I mean, it is. It's that card fuel thing. Yeah, interesting. I'll have to go back to the rule book for Liberté and see what more comparisons I can draw now that you said that. It's a way shorter game too, Andy.
Oh yeah, no, like, I didn't say it's like a retheme, but it's based on some of the concepts from.
Yeah, it's shorter, but it doesn't. I think that it's in so much it's built on kind of the thing I heard about Liberté is a really cool system, but it's kind of built on this sort of random card draw, and some cards are kind of better than others, and it's just like this card's better. Whereas in this, it's that the cards aren't necessarily better; they're just different.
Yeah.
So that is my hype for MOA by Martin Wallace. So MOA Wallace means MOA. Fun. MOA. There's going to be a lot of bleeps in this episode if I ever get around to actually editing it. And now let's go ahead and hear from Trent, our tabletop. What is the internet troll? The Party Pooper game.
No, that's not what I'm going to talk about.
Damn it!
Sorry, man.
Dang it! I was looking forward to the whole episode to hearing about this. Such a letdown.
How do you party?
New expansion to Cards Against Humanity.
Okay, instead of what I'm going to do is I'm going to hype a prediction.
Okay.
Okay, so
crystal ball, looking into the future.
All right, tomorrow, GMT Games every month comes out with new editions of their P500. And right now I'm going to predict something that's going to be added to it, and it's my hype. And it's going to be Mark Herman's follow-up to Churchill and Pericles. I predict that's going to be on it, and it's going to be about the resolution of World War I.
Yeah, the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Now, why do I
so happy if that happened?
Now, why did I predict this? They were on there hyping it pretty hard about like it was a really well-known designer and on Twitter and stuff. And I was aware that the Mark Herman had been working on this, and I responded to them by suggesting that's what the game was. I'm literally the only person they didn't write back to. And then the designer of the coin games liked what I wrote and followed me immediately. So I'm thinking I'm right. I'm thinking
a thumbs up.
Yep, I'm thinking I'm right on the guess.
The moment's finally coming.
Yeah, wow. I am such a huge fan of that series that there's another one coming out. I'm really looking forward to it.
That's an interesting prediction because they just charged for Fort Sumner, Mark Herman's newest one. So following that up with the game that just came out would be very bold. That'd make me very happy and very broke.
TC would have to have discussions, which is right.
Yeah.
So that's my hype. It's I've heard it under different names. The one I've mostly heard it from is Wilson, but I've also heard some people referring to it as 1919. But if there's a game from Mark Herman about the end of World War I that's like a follow-up to Churchill tomorrow, I guessed it.
Well, my Carissa's been following this one quite a bit because her field of studies World War I, and she is very interested in this one because she's fascinated with how the Treaty of Versailles came about and how it led up into how it led up to World War II. So yeah, if that's true, you're gonna hear a shout from overall way here in Portland from my wife. Really wanting this one.
Well, since we're on the GMT kick, why don't we go ahead and move right into TC's hype?
Oh yes, I finally got my hands on a copy of Welcome to Centerville. I am very excited to try this one because I think I'm one of 8 people approximately who really enjoyed Urban Sprawl. Not be less than 8. I mean,
I did. I liked it.
Oh, yes,
Ding,
thank
ding.
you. Yeah, so because everyone
Urban Sprawl, population 9.
Everyone I played Urban Sprawl with was like, "This is the most chaotic, crazy thing." I'm like, "Yeah, it's awesome. I love this thing." Then the more you play it, the more you can figure it out. But they wouldn't play anymore, and I was very sad.
It's not as chaotic as you initially thought.
No, you play it. No, you play it. The more you play it, the more you can see it. But that's a entirely different thing. I loved Urban Sprawl. I'm curious. This is essentially, it looks like Urban Sprawl, the dice game. From what I've read about it, by paging through the rulebook a bit, it looks like as far as you can take a Yahtzee style game into making it a heavy game. I mean, it's just crazy what you can do with these die rolls and how to like buy things and get a strategy going. It looks bananas. I am very excited to get this one a try and report back on it because this might be not be the dice chucker that really sinks in.
How do you fix a game that everybody complained for being too chaotic? Add dice.
Well, it's just from what I could tell, there's ways to mitigate it, and there's like figuring out what you buy. There's like multiple routes to victory. I'll report back on it, but it looks super fascinating.
It's puzzly. It's puzzly, even though it's a Yahtzee, inspired game, kind of a Yahtzee.
There's like so many decisions you can make with the dice that's not dependent on the dice roll. I think that's the key. But yeah, I'm super excited to try this one out. Ever since I heard about it, and I'm like finally got. I'm like, yes, welcome to Centerville, yes. But they didn't call it Urban Sprawl because people hated Urban Sprawl, so they're gonna try sneaking in under the radar.
Well, nice, thanks, TC. And finally, finishing it out with the eclectic, I believe, an expansion to a Hollandspiel game, which means
not an expansion, standalone.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, a standalone game, which by standalone, Andy means that if you take the paper map and fold it, you can actually get it to stand up because you can make like an origami swan out of it.
But only after you've like P&P'd a game board with it. Anyway, so I'm gonna hype because I really want to get to this table. Supply Lines of the American Revolution, the Southern Strategy, which came out from Hollandspiel just recently. The thing, it kind of twists up a little bit from the normal supply lines. It really is about, keeping your lines supplied for your war. But they add in kind of the way the Revolutionary War was fought in the South. So this takes place after the French have gotten involved with things. So there's a whole lot of partisan warfare. So there's these little boxes over to the side with partisans, and whoever controls more of that's going to affect what you can do within certain regions or cities. So you can spend these chits to do certain things. You have much smaller militaries overall. There wasn't a whole lot of just big stand-up battles going on. The thing that I think is really neat too is they add in siege mechanics. So now if you can, get to an enemy's fort or city and occupy 2 of the lanes leading to it, that area becomes under siege. Now, when it's under siege, this becomes interesting because it cannot produce supplies anymore. Furthermore, at the end of every round, it must remove a food cube that it has. And if the food cubes are totally removed, or if it has to remove one and there isn't one, the whole army just surrenders. You just take out whatever it is that's there defending it. There's like, no, we're starving, we give up, I'm sorry. And so it becomes what I feel like it becomes is less about necessarily having these lines and hitting somebody with a big army like the Northern campaign was a little more. It becomes about trying to set up the sieges in such a way that you can exploit that. But you can do things like, if the loyalists, the British are coming at you with a bigger military because they have one, you could go lay siege to one of their main, areas. Be like, well, I just laid siege to this. You could continue coming after me with a big military, or you're going to have to defer it and go deal with this. Have fun. But they also add in navies, and navies can be used to transport materials or lay siege from coastlines as well. And it's really neat because the navies don't always necessarily come in. So what happens is if your navy is not present, you roll a dice on a 1 to 2, your navy appears. But what becomes interesting with that too is then as soon as one person's navy is in the region, the next person has to roll a 1, 2, or 3. So it becomes easier for them to get theirs in. So it becomes kind of luck to get your first navy going. But then like it's more odds the other navy's going to come in and it's going to be a pain. But you got to kind of watch that too, because if you're doing things where you're like transporting a lot of materials on your ship during winter or something like that, and you can't offload it, you just lose it all.
That gave Andy way too much joy to say.
Oh yeah, that's something like it would be just so much fun as the Patriots to set up the British. Like, I'm gonna move all these armies over here. Crap.
Goodbye.
But it does become, it's a little bit more unstable, it looks like too, because basically I forget which one, but I think it's if the Patriots lose their leader, they're just done. Like they've lost. So if you're going to commit your leader, you better be darn sure about what you're doing. And so there's a little bit more, it looks like, conditions that can just end the game right there. And so you have to be a little more cautious with how you deploy people. Anyway, that's supply lines. My only gripe about the game really is that the title is shorter.
Should be a longer title, right?
Oh yeah, they didn't include any dates with it.
Yeah, they needed to, right? And they also needed to like use a name of a popular other board game.
Yeah. Actually, who was it? It might have been lower player count. They got a supply lines of the American Revolution, the Northern Theater. They got a copy from Hollandspiel to give away. And the contest was take a favorite like Euro game and make it have a convoluted title like that game. To be like farming in the age of the Black Death from 1600 to 25. Oh, Agricola.
Like a huge, yeah, like a huge, like what you'd expect to be like a the elevator pitch of the game.
Yeah,
title. Yeah,
it's good stuff. But I really want to play it. It looks really fun.
How many does this play again?
Oh, it's 2. It's just a 2-player like the first one. But it, like a lot of I'm learning Tom Russell's games are very unstable games. So a lot of them have just like, yeah, can we admit I've lost this conditions? Because to win the supply lines games, you ultimately have to leave yourself weak somewhere. And if somebody can exploit that real well, you can quickly end up into I'm not winning this situation. So you pack it up and you play another one. Well, but anyway, I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Andy. Yep, that's Supply Lines: The American Revolution, the too long to say title.
Southern strategy. The almost
Southern strategy. No, I know. At that point, it was 3 more words. I knew what they were too. I just wanted to make that terrible joke. So, anyway, and that terrible joke is the heralding in the hark. Do you hear that? It's the end of this episode of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. I hope that everybody out there has a great week of gaming, and catch us next week on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.